Good morning, one and all, and welcome to another Dantastic Monday here at the Damage Report with me, John DeRola, and our Monday co-host, Dan Evans. Dan, how's it going?
Really great. When you started the show, I really felt like we were back to doing our good morning bad news shoots because you really gave that good morning a lot of really good gusto there. You said it with your chest. I love it.
Yeah, I can't wait to see. So we recorded a couple weeks ago now. I don't know when that's gonna come out, but I wanna see it because it's the highest energy I've been since college for that shoot. Can't wait to see it. And very glad to have you here on the program. Thank you once again for filling in for Francesca Fiorentini as she is off being a mom and all that. Very glad to have you here. We've got a lot to talk about. Before we jump into our stories though, I just wanna mention that I saw this. So at the close of last week, Lindsey Graham had been told, no, you actually do need to testify before this grand jury in Georgia, the Fulton County investigation of election fraud. He was gonna have to testify. Clarence Thomas has apparently jumped in and freezed that order, stopping Lindsey Graham from having to testify in an election fraud lawsuit. Clarence Thomas, who you should know two things about him. One, that he's a Supreme Court justice, and two, that he's the devoted husband of one Ginny Thomas, an election conspiracy theorist. He's stopping a sitting senator who might have broken federal law in pressuring election officials in Georgia. He's stopping him from having to testify. That, I'm not a lawyer, we bring in Adrian to take care of that stuff, but that seems pretty damn corrupt.
Yeah, you don't have to be a lawyer. You don't even have to have been near a legal proceeding, hopefully, God willing, that you can see corruption on the wall. I mean, we've already known a lot of these relationships, and we'll look at the Democratic side with Nancy Pelosi and her husband and insider trading. Like, these are a lot of corrupt relationships we have in Washington. But this is a massive deal because this targets our democracy itself. The efforts to say that elections across the country were rigged that happened in 2020, that will continue to happen in the midterms just 2 weeks from now. I guarantee it, they're still gonna try to contest elections that Republicans lose in. This is an actual threat to democracy. And we see it actually happening when you have one branch of government within the Republicans with Lindsey Graham, who are willing to do these kinds of things. And then you have Clarence Thomas and the Supreme Court, who is willing to protect him, all right? All you need is one more branch, the presidency, which Republicans are fighting tooth and nail, pulling every fear-mongering tactic, scaremongering out of the book to possibly make happen. All you need is that Republican in the federal branch, in the executive branch, and that's it. Who's saying we have a democracy? Who is saying they don't just say, as I've been emphasizing on this program a lot of times, they say if Republicans win, that's a legit election. If Republicans lose, that's an illegitimate election. Barely anything stops them other than the effort required in making a couple of excuses to make it look legal.
Yeah, and none of it has to make any sense. I was just listening this morning to an episode of The Daily where they have the head of elections in Maricopa County, who's a Republican, talking about the election fraud, conspiracy theories and everything. And he apparently spent months trying to get through to his other Republicans that this stuff wasn't true. He's on the inside, he's in charge of the election things. And they were talking about the primaries this time around. Carrie Lake won her primary. An election denier won the race for AG on the Republican side and for the Secretary of State on the Republican side. And one would think that would cause the conspiracy theorists to question, wait, if they're rigging all these elections, why did they let all of the people who claim the elections are rigged win? Why is Carrie Lake the nominee? Why didn't Joe Biden and Hugo Chavez just beat her in the primary? Doesn't make any sense. None of this makes any sense. And so it's gonna be really bad this time around. Everyone's gonna need you ready yourself for literally months of challenges and stuff like that. But for now, I would like to at least get a little bit of clarity on what Lindsey Graham was up to. And as of right now, we will not. It was just Clarence Thomas. He has jurisdiction in this area. He's able to stop it by himself. This CNN article, it's happening right now, says that they're giving Georgia investigators until Thursday to respond. It doesn't even, to what? The fact that you stopped it? I assume they would like you to not stop it. That's their response. I don't understand any of this except that of any of the people in the Supreme Court to be making this move, the fact that it's Clarence Thomas, there's gotta be, something has to happen. How many times can he be directly involved in the cover up of the response to the 2020 election? Anyway, that's just happening right now. I don't have any other details about it, and we do have a lot of other stories to talk about. But I will warn you, there is other potential breaking news coming up in about 25 minutes. Supposedly, Merrick Garland and other senior officials at the DOJ are going to be announcing something of a significant national security matter. It doesn't seem like it's about January 6th or any of the documents or anything, but we will see. We're gonna keep our eyes open on that. For now, though, please hit the like button, share the stream if you haven't already, and you can send us tweets, comments, and super chats and all that, and we'll respond as we go. But with all that said, Dan, is that a sign that you're ready to start the show?
That's my virtual like that I'm like throwing onto the screen that I'm making sure people are just like sending to us. I'm doing a lot of viewer engagement. That's my new sort of motif now. Yes, let's go.
Performative calls to action. Anyway, with that said, why don't we jump into this first video?
They officially subpoenaed Donald Trump. Do you think he'll actually appear for the deposition? And what does it say to the American people if he doesn't?
I don't think he's man enough to show up. I don't think his lawyers will want him to show up because he has to testify under oath. But I don't think he'll show up. I don't think he's man enough. We'll see. We'll see if he's man enough to show up.
Okay, so it is one thing for Nancy Pelosi to drop the he's not man enough once. But when she does it like 4 distinct times in a 45-second period, this is a very intentional thing by Nancy Pelosi, as if we needed the repetition. Look, Nancy Pelosi, like she has a lot of flaws and we enjoy talking about them on a daily basis. One thing she definitely does, and her base loves, is these little performative hits, these little digs, and specifically throwing Donald Trump's manhood, his manliness under the bus is intended to get a response from him. And it sort of did, and we're gonna turn to that. But this is clearly trying to provoke him into testifying. Now bear in mind, Nancy Pelosi is not on this committee. Her interests, her read of the situation can be very different from that of Liz Cheney or Schiff or whoever else is actually involved in it. So maybe for her, it's just a fun little thing to goad him into. They also want him to testify, or at the very least, that's what the committee says. But Dan, I'm curious, is this a tactic that you think will inspire him to maybe override the advice of his lawyers and testify, against their better judgment?
Well, you can't use the law, so I guess juvenile bullying tactics is the next best thing you've got with Donald Trump. And I'm saying that with a smile and a little bit of a chuckle, but I'm dead serious. Like, when you think of how every single time Trump went overseas or abroad, especially after the first couple of months of his administration, every foreign leader kind of knew how to play Trump like a fiddle. It's always shower him with compliments, give him some awards, maybe name a military base after them. I think there's some country in Northern Europe that did something like that. And it was like, oh, this is gonna be now our Trump military base. Just shower him with praise. This is how it works. But if you want to provoke a response from him, challenge his manhood, challenge his cachet with the right wing, challenge his acumen as a business person, the things that he really prides himself on, that he tries to make a lot of money on by grifting from a lot of Republicans who are seeing him as the literal great white hope. That is what Donald Trump really benefits from. And so, and I think that's what Donald Trump really responds to. And so I think it's a decent move from Nancy Pelosi. I'm glad they're trying everything they can, because we also, like I said in the beginning, the legal moves aren't surefire to work, because we've given him subpoena and all these other different things. He's been through multiple impeachments, and he's shown a flagrant willingness to ignore laws and precedents and the way we do things in America, and to a dangerous ways. That's why we're here right now. That's why we're having a January 6th commission to begin with. So I am not gonna give Nancy Pelosi any kind of credit or anything. I'm just gonna say passively, I'm glad that this tactic is being used by someone.
Yeah, and we're under no obligation to give her the credit, because as we've talked about multiple times, we're not gonna go super in depth. The only small minor chance that he could have actually been convicted following his impeachment didn't happen because the timeline was pushed because of Nancy Pelosi's choices. So again, like, you can throw like little insults against him right now, but when you had an opportunity to perhaps have actual legal consequences, you stood in the way of that. You made a gamble and it turned out bad. But anyway, maybe it'll work. Like, he doesn't like being insulted, and he surely will not like being insulted by Nancy Pelosi specifically. She's hit him a few times and he has never responded well. I just checked his Truth Social, and so far he has not specifically responded, which I'm going to interpret as a massive sign of weakness. You little baby, she punched you in the face, you're not gonna respond. But he did bleat this. Why didn't the January 6th committee of unselects? You get it? Because normally there's select committees, so he's saying that they're unselected, even though it's selected. It's the same thing. What are you talking about? Are you a baby? Anyway, discuss the massive voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election, which is the thing that led to the tremendous protest. Also, no talk of Pelosi turning down military protection 3 days before January 6th. Why? Again, so this is the standard thing that they do where they say nothing bad happened on January 6th. It was totally cool. It was totally fine protest. And why didn't she have nukes at the ready for it? For what? The thing that you say we shouldn't care about, right? Isn't that convenient? But anyway, what he's willing to do is sort of obliquely reference Pelosi, but not respond to her. And he's still, like a week and a half into it, has not yet made clear whether he's going to testify. If you think that the unselects should have been talking about the voter fraud, you have a great opportunity to do that under oath before the committee. That would be a great opportunity. We'll see.
I will also add one last thing. There was a lot of footage, a lot of video. Trump is on the record for saying that only guilty people plead the Fifth Amendment. If you're innocent, quote, if you're innocent, why would you plead the Fifth Amendment? So, Donald Trump, this is no problem for you, as you've been saying on all platforms, whatever, then go ahead, defend yourself, launch your campaign. I challenge Donald Trump, if he's actually man enough, to launch his campaign at the January 6th hearing. Your base would love it. It would be the ultimate stage. CNN would air it even before you got to the podium. We know that for a fact. You would be, it's a great opportunity for you. Just play it for the jury. Say everything you want to, just whatever you do, don't plead the Fifth Amendment, because only weak losers and babies like silly Ron DeSantis would possibly just plead the Fifth Amendment or do anything like that. So go ahead, buddy, go ahead, because he listens to me.
Yeah, exactly. I like the challenge. Okay, we have another little tidbit of news that's sort of connected to the whole January 6th thing. That is it important? No. Does it give us an opportunity to make fun of Ted Cruz? Yes, and so we're gonna cover it. Let's jump into this.
You go to remember when Trump called your wife ugly? Remember that? Remember when Trump called your wife ugly and then you nominated him? You're this country. You fucking shit. Remember when those insurrectionists wanted to murder you?
Okay, so Ted Cruz took a little trip to New York to appear on The View, which apparently got a protest from climate activists, and to promote his new book. And maybe he should have gone to the Yankees game. It was not a very warm welcome. But he also, in this book now, has revealed a little bit of what happened to him on January 6th, and I feel like we have to talk about it. He says that at some point following the building being breached, senators were led to what he calls a secure location where tempers were high, with several senators blaming us explicitly for the violence that was occurring. While we waited for the Capitol to be secured, I assembled our coalition in a back room, really a supply closet with stacked chairs, to discuss what we should do next. Now, look, he's gonna continue on, and I'm sure in his mind, he sees this as a demonstration of him standing strong before those other Democrats who are blaming him for this. But when you are presenting yourself as having to go hide in a closet because people are roaming the corridors looking to murder politicians, that doesn't present you as a particularly strong person, especially when you are then gonna demonstrate that despite the threat to your own life, you're siding with those people. If you're just scared of those people, you didn't inspire it, then it makes all the sense in the world. Defend yourself, protect yourself. You are a victim, and it makes sense that we would feel bad for you. But when he goes on to say that several members of the group argued that in the face of the riot, we should suspend our objections and vote to certify the election, I understood the sentiment, but I vehemently disagreed with it. I urged my colleagues that the course of action we were advocating was the right and principled one. Yeah, but it was also on the side of the people who were rampaging through the building looking to kill people, including the people you were in the closet with. So again, like he is a dude who now his life is he goes to baseball games and people make fun of him to his face, and it's hilarious. And he really gave the game away by looking at the person shouting. If he had just not looked, then you could have believed maybe he didn't hear it, but he definitely heard it. And hiding in closets when the consequences come a calling. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, when I think of people who are the authority on right and principle, the last person I think of is that man right there, Ted Cruz, or anyone in the Republican Party for that matter, because he, just like that guy was saying right there, he called out right there. Remember when Donald Trump called your wife ugly? Do you remember that? And do you remember when a couple months later you were literally in a photo like this, mean mugging because you were phone banking for one Donald John Trump because you're a party man and you're looking for whatever will get you to most political success, no matter how much you debase yourself and your family and whatever principles you were supposed to have. Even though, again, he has no principles because he flip-flops, he switches on everything. Even Texas Republicans know this. They just see him as a vessel for ideology they somewhat agree with. But Texas Republicans are sick of, they see him as no different from any other politician, even a Democratic one, as in they don't trust him. So I take nothing Ted Cruz says even factually accurate at this point.
Yeah, and all of this, remember, never forget, all of this is part of his master plan to just get through these Trump years, and eventually he's gonna prove them all wrong. He was the smart one, he was the savvy one, he's still gonna be president, he's sure of that. And look, America is hell, so maybe he's right. Him being president would suck, so we can't rule it out. But I don't know, just the endless mockery that he's facing, all in service of a plot that doesn't seem like it has a great chance of succeeding. Anyway, with that said, let's turn to something more significant. All of that is about the 2020 election, but bear in mind there's all sorts of threats coming at us for the 2022 election. So with that, let's jump into this video. So right there you see ballot watchers. That's what they would call themselves. What they are is random people who have hidden their faces behind masks. Finally, they'll wear a mask, wearing tactical gear, and according to sheriffs that investigating it, they were armed as well. So they posted up in Mesa, Arizona, looking to intimidate people who were going to vote. Nicole Grigg shared some of this footage, and you can, if you want to see more of the video, it's available. But also provided some details about these people. They had extra clips of ammunition, and they were in fact armed. Now, we're told that the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office responded. The men had apparently already left, very brave, but deputies measured to make sure ballot watchers weren't too close. And I'm glad that they did that because I know a lot of people seeing guys with guns trying to intimidate voters. You see that and you get concerned. Are they within 75 feet of the polling place? That's what I'm concerned about. No, not at all. I'm concerned about their presence at all. But apparently they would have to be within that 75 feet for it to actually be a crime. That's what the deputies say. They measured it and apparently it was fine. And so no need to worry, America. People are bringing guns to polling sites, but as long as they kind of keep their distance, it's not intimidation. By the way, you can see the actual part of the federal election laws right here, code 594, intimidation of voters, that in theory we could start to enforce that. I think that would be great. I don't know why 76 feet is okay, but 74 isn't. In any event, Dan, this is apparently happening in multiple areas of Arizona. There are also reports of intimidation in North Carolina. And as we get closer to actual election day, we can expect there's gonna be much more. This was for the early voting. Those guys were out there. Imagine what's gonna be happening on the actual election day.
And this is stuff that we on the left have been warning about for years. And it's important to note that the first bill that the past couple of Democratic houses have passed together is an election reform act to address some of these issues where you have secretaries of state in different states trying to do funny things because they're working with the Republican Party to make it so their voter fraud claims look like reality, which is funny doublespeak because the Republicans are the ones actually trying to commit voter fraud or voter suppression at the very least. And so this goes back to minor history lessons like the history of ballot box intimidation and voter intimidation that was specifically targeting marginalized communities and communities of color. You better believe these people who have guns out and they think that there's going to be some stealing of ballots or harvesting of ballots. They don't have great opinions of trans people. They don't have great opinions of Muslims or any other marginalized group. So this is absolutely dangerous. The fact that you don't have Republicans who are calling out anything about this also says something about the Republican Party, but this is just something that we are just starting to accept in society. The last thing, a history lesson I would give is that, this is a pipe dream at this point based on how Democratic power is looking. But one thing that happened after the Civil War during Reconstruction was that states that were states that basically were in the South that tried to secede were put under special rules supervising how their voting and their election processes went because it was assumed that they would try to suppress the black vote.
Yep.
We should definitely do the same thing for all of these states that are trying to cry wolf for election fraud. That should be the punishment. If you say that, okay, we have election fraud here and you're a Republican Secretary of State and it's proven that it's negligible voter fraud, then you as a state are proven untrustworthy. You have your elections need to get supervised by another independent body because it's very clear that you are working to get one single party elected. You are the anti-democratic forces that you are crying about. Look in the damn mirror.
So you're basically advocating for a double or nothing election challenge system. Like if you challenge it and you're right, good, you found the fraud. But if not, now we're gonna go even harder towards letting people vote.
Absolutely,
I like it. Now, unfortunately, and by the way, thank you so much for pointing out that while these sorts of guys, and 90% of them are gonna be guys, are gonna be everywhere, think about the intersection between this and racism. Like, what do you think is gonna happen in urban areas in red states, for instance? Like, we just have to cross our fingers and hope no election workers get murdered this time around? No bombs go off, no one drives a truck into a line of voters. Like, we just have to cross our fingers and hope that against all odds, none of that happens. When there's been 2 solid years of people whose entire personality is believing that Trump got robbed, preparing to do something to draw the eye and the notice of their great master.
Not only that, but they also believe it's a life or death thing because they believe that if Republicans don't win, Democrats are going to mutilate their kids. Like that's actually the political discourse it's gotten to. It's ridiculous, it's sick. We talk against it on TYT and other networks on the left all the time, but because they've heightened it to a life or death situation, we now have to worry about life or death in poll numbers. Because unfortunately, the things you mentioned about trucks ramming through crowds or shootings, this is America. That stuff can totally happen. And I would be so devastated to see that on election day.
100%. Really fast, I just want to make sure that you understand some of the different ways that these intimidation cases work. Let's jump to a description of another one that Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, who's also running, of course, reported. I believe this was in Mesa as well.
If you read through the complaint, is he wrote that the people he was engaging with were, quote, filming and photographing my wife and I as we approached the drop box and accusing us of being a mule. More on that in a second. And that they took photographs of our license plate and of us and followed us out of the parking lot. That mule reference, Anderson, is referencing a conspiracy film that is often quoted by far-right conspiracy websites and by some right-wing Republicans who are running for office in the state of Arizona. Anderson?
Yeah, so look, maybe they'll point a gun at you, but more likely they're gonna point a camera at you. They're going to be investigating you, they've been doing this for literally a year and a half now to election workers, trying to harass them on social media sites, tracking them down, tracking their license plate. And look, that's gonna intimidate the people that are actually there. But also, a lot of people might just make the calculation, is it really worth it? Like, I don't know, I'm a little bit tired. I didn't really want to vote anyway. And now maybe there's a dude with an AR-15 there. Like, the goal is to get 0.2% of the electorate to just decide that it's not worth it and to not show up, to drive people out of politics. That's one of the big goals. And it's gonna be impossible to say if that worked. Anyone who decides not to show up, we will never know. But it would be very reasonable that some people might make that calculation at this point.
This is not wild speculation. There's the story of Ruby Freeman, who was actually intimidated by a Trump, by people who are part of the Trump campaign. She was a poll worker in Georgia in 2020, and like Associated Press covered this, a number of other outlets covered this, where Trump allies essentially were like from the Trump campaign were threatening her with imprisonment and pressuring her and her family unless she testified and fell in line with the Trump line of thinking that there was voter fraud in Georgia, okay? We know this is what they're doing. This is not even counting the Four Seasons landscaping thing that happened in Pennsylvania, like that attempt. It's not even counting the stuff that's happening in Arizona that we're talking about right now. We know this side is capable of this. So why are we acting like, well, gee, it can't happen again? When this is what happened last election. They're gonna learn from last election and try to come back harder. So we need to actually defend instead of doing too little too late. I worry we do a Band-Aid solution on all of these electoral threats when it is too little too late, because that's the American way.
Yeah, I mean, right now I would even take the Band-Aid. I don't even see a Band-Aid. I don't see the container of Band-Aids even being opened. I see basically nothing. Hopefully every individual little local election board is taking this seriously, because there doesn't appear to be any organized response to any of this. In the defense of those who should defend us, they've only had a year and a half to prepare. Why should they have anything, I guess? Okay, the test, like the live press conference of the DOJ, is apparently beginning now. Oh, it was Brandy, thank you. That's beginning now. We're gonna see in a few minutes if maybe we have some details. But for now, let's jump into another topic, starting with this.
On the underlying offenses is up to life in prison.
Yes, sir.
And that would be life in prison without parole, you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Keese, is there a plea agreement?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Sir, did you have an opportunity to review People's Exhibit number 1 with your attorneys?
Yes, sir.
And this is the plea form that covers all of your rights, sir?
Yes, sir.
That is 16-year-old Ethan Crumbley pleading guilty to all of the 24 charges facing him. I understand that you might not recognize the name Ethan Crumbley because America has so many school shooters that it's difficult to remember all of them. Actually, as we're recording this, apparently there was a shooting at a school in St. Louis where multiple people have died. But this was a particularly bad one, many people harmed, and it's also a case in which all of the warning signs were there. If any shooting could have been averted, this is probably that one, and yet it wasn't. So let's dive into it. Now, I guess it is good that he pleaded guilty. He will face life in prison. Bear in mind, back in November of 2021, he had a gun that he hid in his backpack. He pulled it out in the bathroom and began firing at any of his classmates that he could. His parents, Jennifer and James Crumbley, are also facing charges after allegedly aiding his access to firearms and ignoring warning signs before the attack. In the hearing, Crumbley said the gun that he used in the massacre was purchased by his dad. But that was not the only involvement of the parents in this. A teacher had, prior to the shooting, discovered a drawing with a gun pointing at the words, "The thoughts won't stop, help me." There was an image of a bullet with the message, "blood everywhere." They contacted the parents, and James and Jennifer Crumbley declined to take their son home on November 30th, the day before the shoot, or that was the day of the shooting. But were told to get him into counseling within 48 hours. A day before that, a teacher had seen Ethan searching for ammunition on his phone. The school contacted his mother, who told her son in a text message, "Lol, I'm not mad at you. You have to learn not to get caught." That was within days of him attempting to kill as many of his classmates as possible. So he will spend probably the rest of his life in prison. That, of course, doesn't undo any of the damage of the shooting. But one would hope that maybe parents would take these sorts of warning signs a little bit more seriously with this back in the news as a reminder. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, and when we're talking about common sense gun reform, we could actually point to, I think one would be in cases like this where you have warning signs that, look, I don't even think these are invasions of privacy per se. We already have the standard for if you suspect there's domestic violence going on in the home and you're a teacher and you see signs of this, you have to report it to, there are systems for reporting that to school administration, to authorities. That this has to be included in that, and by not doing that, that should also be included in child negligence, because not only is it negligent to the health of this child who's now going to be spending the rest of his life behind bars because he did not get the counseling and mental health care that he so clearly needed and seemed to be asking for at a certain point, but it's also going to be negligent to all of the kids who he murdered, right? Like, we can't lose sight of that horrible tragedy that's here too. And so that's a common sense gun reform there. The idea that, and I also don't think that's that much of an invasion of privacy, as I was saying, because that always is a touchy thing that people try to point out and saying, hey, even on the left, even on leftist organizations that have been historically known to arm themselves, you don't want to set the precedent where there's any sort of surveillance into people with weapons, sure. But these are kids. Let's extract ourselves from society here. Again, we're the only country in the world where people can go to school and not come back because they were shot, and it's statistically higher than like 0.00001% to happen. That's ridiculous. We need to start doing some things about it, and I'll remind people, like guns safety advocates remind people, a lot of these reforms are common sense and popular even with conservatives.
Yep. A lot of these even with NRA members. It's just the craziest people are in charge. And bear in mind, so this 16-year-old was able to get a hold of a handgun. If he'd had an assault rifle, he would have done even more damage. And there are people in positions of power who think he should have been free to go buy one. If he'd been able to scratch together $1,000, $2,000, they think he should have been able to get better weaponry to prepare for his school shooting. And people who believe that are in positions of power, in states, in the federal government. It's a lot of fun living in America. Anyway, finally, we have a statement from lawyer Ben Johnson, who represents the families affected in this shooting, saying Ethan Crumbley's guilty plea is one small step forward on a long path towards obtaining full justice for our clients. We'll continue to fight until the truth is revealed about what went wrong leading up to this tragedy and who, including Crumbley's parents and multiple Oxford Community Schools employees, could have and should have prevented it. You can see a shot of him there. Also, randomly in the same 24-hour period, by the way, another former police officer has also pleaded guilty in the death of the case of the death of George Floyd, and you can see two of the cops who've pleaded guilty there. There's been a very long, drawn-out process to get justice in that particular case as well, but a little bit today, a little bit. Okay, with that said, I am going to move ahead to the next block. We're still waiting to see what's gonna come of this press conference. I'm a little bit worried that I'm getting my hopes up, not in any specific area. I don't think that it's about a domestic concern, but just that they're really gonna have anything. Merrick Garland seems to love teasing the American public and then not actually coming through. But anyway, we're gonna see what happens. Let's jump to this next story. It's probably not gonna come as a surprise to you that America's kids are continuing to suffer, and their scores in standardized testing are reflecting that. Coming out of the pandemic, I don't think most people expected that things would go well, but math scores have fallen in nearly every state. Reading scores have dipped in many states as well. And this is across many demographic groups, not evenly, of course, but I wanna give you some of the results. This is, by the way, based on a sampling of nearly 500,000 4th and 8th graders in more than 10,000 different schools across the country. In math, the results of these scores were especially devastating. You can see in this little graph that only 36% of 4th graders were considered proficient in math. That was actually 26 in 8th grade. So they actually fall behind as they get through elementary school. That was down 8 points from just 3 years ago. In reading, the proficiency scores have also dropped. Only 1 in 3 proficient at 4th grade, slightly less in 8th grade. And you can see losing ground over time, losing ground as they advance through school. Reading scores declined in more than half states. So not as bad as math, but still not good. And by the way, the trend of test scores and proficiency ratings going down had already been established long before the pandemic. It was just exacerbated by the difficulty of not being able to be in school. And look, it's affecting all students, but as I said, not evenly. Black and Hispanic students who were already behind white and Asian peers prior to this period have experienced even sharper declines, particularly in math tested at the 4th grade level. Access to things like computers also tracked by this. Obviously there's inequity there too. And the issue is that we have maybe more of a national focus on what's going on in our schools than we've had in my lifetime. More parents fired up to take part in school board meetings and all that. They are really invested in all the wrong areas. Test scores are going down, but is that what parents are freaking out about? No, what they're freaking out about is the possibility that there might be a box of kitty litter in the bathroom. They're not worried about the lack of computers, they're worried about the presence of kitty litter. And they're worried about what their teachers are telling them about their own identity rather than about geography or history or anything like that. It's such a lost opportunity. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, that one statistic that was just in that quote you read that said sharper declines, or like Black and Hispanic students experience sharper declines than those groups in 4th grade math. My niece is a Black and Hispanic student in 4th grade math and science and all of those other things. And like she's really smart relatively, and she's in a decent like middle class environment, and so like she's been able to get like more resources than the average person. But her brother, who is younger, I've seen has just been struggling throughout the pandemic because he was at such a young age where missing out on that social interaction, missing out on a lot of that learning and education. Like you're really seeing it in a lot of people and a lot of folks this generation. The only thing is like the devastating point you just had there that's totally true is more people are paying attention to schools. It's not about how schools are funded. It's about how what critical race theory is or isn't being taught in schools. It's not being taught in elementary schools or middle schools or high schools even. All these fake moral panics and fake, LGBTQ plus people are coming for your children, which is entirely not the case. Those are the stuff we're focusing on, and it's taking away from these actual issues. But the only thing there is that I'm not really surprised that these are the issues that they're focusing on, because all these issues of marginalized students from marginalized communities performing worse, these are happening before COVID. Everything that was happening before COVID was happening before COVID. It just got exacerbated by it. When it comes to inequality, when it comes to people not having access to things they should be having, that was the status quo beforehand. It's just a little bit worse now, substantially worse than it would have been otherwise without the pandemic. People just kind of don't care because they didn't care before. And that's kind of what we always need to fight against.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, they're going through school libraries to find which books they can take out. Like that's what they're doing. Our kids can't read, and they're trying to stop them from having access to books. It's insane. I've always felt a little bit weird about homeschooling because of the weird ideological thing. But I feel like you have to, like that has to become a thing. And obviously, think about like how are you going to do that when you have to have 3 jobs, like or both parents, assuming it's a 2-parent household, have to be working constantly. Like if you have to start to supplement education more and more with stuff by the parents. Not all parents are gonna be able to do that. Not all parents are gonna be able to afford tutors and study aids and all this stuff. Like it's setting up a really sick system. And the thing is, like we might look at this and think that this is like, forget the consequences of this. This is bad on its own, like on its face, it's bad. We want kids to be able to read and do math and care about education and all that. But not everyone shares those values. Like why would a right winger, why would a business owner look at this and think this is a bad thing for the future of America? Why wouldn't they want dumb, incurious kids who can't think critically and just accept whatever they're told and have no ability to look at a conspiracy theory and have any idea whether it's reliable or not? Why wouldn't they want kids who are just going to like easily slot into jobs that are gonna grind them down over the course of their life? I am really worried about what the next couple generations are gonna be like. And not that they have to be like, but that we're going to limit their potential in so many different ways. We have access to so much information. And how are they gonna have the tools to actually process any of it?
I mean,
I don't like it at all.
Yeah.
I know nobody's gonna watch this video, by the way, but this really worries me.
But like, last thought is that there is a lot of great information out there. It's just that we're not even teaching kids how to process good versus bad information. And so that's what I really worry about in the future.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, well, we got more stories to get to. We need to take a break though. We'll be back in just a few. Oh geez, prepare to get crazy. Let's jump into this. Far-right group Reawaken America decided to congregate in Pennsylvania to talk about, I guess, what they think Christianity is about in 2022. I don't know, let's see what we can learn in this.
Post. We need to pray that any machine, any satellite, any computer that is trying to destroy our people, trying to program our people, we need to pray that the angels of the living God will release fire to destroy them. We need to pray that when they gather together against us, like the Bible says in Isaiah 8 verse 9, that they shall be broken into pieces. We need to pray and crash land their demonic satellites. We need to send a Holy Ghost virus into their computers to destroy them so that they will not function until our election is over.
You know, it's been a few years since I was an active participant at church. I didn't realize how cyberpunk it had gotten in recent years. A Holy Ghost virus. I want to write a story about this. Church is more exciting than it used to be. Okay, so that is Stella Emanuel, who is a doctor, it turns out, rather than some sort of priest. Neither of those two options makes me remotely comfortable. But anyway, this is the woman who you might recall from talking in the past about demon sperm and stuff like that. She's very big in right-wing circles because why wouldn't she be? She's insane. And there she's talking about destroying voting machines, destroying satellites. I don't know exactly how you do that, but basically destroying all of the infrastructure necessary to have a successful voting system, to have, I don't know, a society, communication, whatever. That wasn't the craziest thing necessarily was said at that meeting. They have a lot of weird theories about hamburgers as well, but Dan, I don't know. What do you think?
I try to, we have different lenses for these things. Us rational people who may be a little bit more, been a couple years since my last time at church as well. We can see these things and go, oh, these are the ravings of a lunatic. A lot of people believe stuff like this. I'm not gonna put anyone under the bus of people I know personally, but their regular run-of-the-mill personal beliefs are not very far off from this. Like, it's religious extremism. It's belief that religion, whatever that means for people, exists above politics. And there's a way to look at that doesn't involve using what you interpret as religious beliefs to marginalize or take away rights from other people. That's totally fine. Many other people do that with their religion. They can separate them, and I think that's fair. That's actually even the Constitution that they love to be originalists about. But in this case, there are people who are listening to her and they're taking her words seriously, or even worse, they're taking her words literally, because prayer is a little bit like the word allegedly. It gives you a little bit of breathing room in a lot of ways. But when you're saying, I pray that voting machines are destroyed, or like I pray that just like in the Bible, our enemies disintegrate. This is like paraphrasing what she's saying. There are a lot of people in this country who listen to that kind of rhetoric and they have bullets and they don't mind doing that because they've been told, not just by her, but by this entire media ecosystem. They've been getting spoon-fed this for years, that the time will come that they have to stand up for their great leader and then America will be great again. Yeah. Scary times, scary times.
It is, and it's so bizarre that you could just have a whole room of people. They all think that she's nailing it with that stuff. Like, this is their whole life. They spend their whole life thinking about this stuff. And then she strolls in there with her demon fire satellites and everything. And every single one of them is like, I love it. Let's get more of it.
The revelation will be televised.
Exactly. I watch like TED Talks. And like, I'm not just like blindly taking in what they're saying too. And these are actual smart people. What I don't understand why their apparatus for interpreting what they're hearing and deciding whether it makes sense is just completely decayed. It's vestigial. It falls. I don't understand it at all. I gotta go to one of these things. What if I find it convincing too? That'd be scary. Anyway, yeah, they also talked about the war on food because they want you to eat insect burgers or something.
You should definitely go with Asher or something to see if you can get into one of those events and just do like a man on the street like style video, like the old Emma videos, like that kind of format. That'd be really fun to watch.
I don't want to just go to the rally. I want to be on the stage and I want to see if I can ad lib a more successful insane rant than what she can do. I know it's crazy and I don't know the religious stuff, but I do read a lot of fantasy and sci-fi. I feel like I could come up with some Holy Ghost viruses and stuff. Anyway, with that said, why don't we end off with possibly one of the scariest things I can think of. Is Marjorie Greene going to be in the White House sooner rather than later? Well, apparently she's been in talks with Donald Trump. That is according to not only sources that know Donald Trump, but also her herself. Marjorie Greene is told a New York Times reporter, and we're gonna get into what Robert Draper has to say in a bit, that she has several times, she said to him, had continuous discussions with Donald Trump about being his running mate. So this is apparently a thing that Donald Trump continually brings up when talking to Marjorie Greene, which is apparently something he does pretty often. Now she says she would be honored to serve, but added that the GOP establishment would not want it. I think the last person the RNC or the National Party wants is me as his running mate, which I don't know, might be true. I don't know what it, by the way, does it make any sense to talk about the head of the NRC as the establishment and not Donald Trump as the head of the establishment? They're all taking it as a given that he will be president. He's the one that chooses all of their candidates. But like Mitch McConnell's the establishment, at what point does it, like he's a relic, I get it, but why is he the establishment and not the guy who has all the power? Again, it's all just marketing. But anyway, the important part is that she is saying they're talking about it. And from my point of view, that would be the best possible way to completely denigrate the idea of the White House or the presidency. It's the most disgusting possible outcome. And so at this point, I don't see how any other outcome could be possible. But Dan, what do you think? Is this a step too far?
Yeah, I think it's very early on right now to be able to tell what a person like Donald Trump, who is erratic and could quite frankly be playing any one of these people or could make the decision, very, very spur of the moment, or it wouldn't be above him to pick a VP candidate and then switch them out afterwards. A little guess who, like a little game show. We know he's a host if nothing else, right? But I think it's important to get into the mindset of, listen, for those of you who have put money on a Trump-Pence unity ticket, I have bridges to sell you. It's not gonna happen. They've both since then just kind of separated kind of the way they talk about each other rhetorically. They're not gonna run together. So we need to think about, okay, who is going to be the next vice president? Now, I'll caution that vice presidential candidates are usually useful for elections and for marketing and rhetoric. Once they're in office, unless it's something a little bit minor like certifying an election, these people don't do a lot of significantly important things. Now, election certification, that would be pretty bad because then that's that federal branch sort of, they can now control the votes in favor of the Republican Party thing I was warning about. But ultimately, Marjorie Taylor Greene would just be a chief crap talker is for Donald Trump, which Donald Trump can do perfectly fine himself. So I'm not sure, whereas Pence was to unite the evangelical vote. I'm not sure what the draw is for Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, what's the additive that Trump doesn't already have, other than loyalty, which he can get from a lot of places.
He can. Look, I think not this week, but next week, my top 10 list is gonna be top 10 reasons Marjorie Greene's gonna be the VP. She will be loyal, which is literally the only thing that he wants. It allows him to say, hey, I'm gonna have a female vice president. while doing as much as possible to denigrate the idea that women are just as capable of serving as anyone else, because he's purposefully choosing literally the stupidest person he could think of. He knows that he's smarter than her, and he hates feeling dumber than other people. She will do literally nothing. She won't challenge him. She won't try to stop him from accomplishing his agenda, as Mike Pence might have occasionally done. She will just go along with everything. I think it's like a slam dunk, but we'll have more to say about that at some point. In any event, that's all the time we have for our first hour. We got way more coming up in the aftermath, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.